Hey guys, iKailaKai here, and just to let you know, the start of this video was filmed a couple of weeks ago in a lost all blue episode that I never got around to editing. So the first part of this video, answering a question from Twitter, is going to be from a couple of weeks ago, but the rest of this video is going to be from a couple of days ago when we filmed it. This episode is going to be primarily talking about the OP16 meta as it starts to shape up, and for any leader that you're going to be playing, of course you need a case for your leader, which is why SleeveChief, the sponsor of this video, has made leader cases for any of your leaders in basically any color. Now, you've probably seen some of these leader cases online at the cost of something like 3 for the cost of $15. And well, let me tell you, these are going to be much, much better price. And anything that you're thinking, not even close. Because from standard colors like black to more exotic colors like pink, you can get 100 of these leader cases for less than €20 on the store, sleevechief.de, through my code Kai5 for 5% off at checkout for less than €20. You get one of these and you're basically going to be set for life in any color of your choice because there's so many choices to pick from. These colored top loaders are going to be going out today on the store, and make sure you get them quickly because SleeveChief products sell out very, very fast. Thank you very much to SleeveChief for sponsoring this video. Sorry for the NA folks who are not able to purchase at the moment, but hopefully you can soon. Let's get into the video.
Welcome everyone to the 15th episode of the All Blue podcast. We are now catching up with the main sets of One Piece, just like East and West are synchronizing in the game. And yeah, we're nearing summer, we're nearing the new format, so that's what we're going to be covering in this new episode, reviewing cards from OP16. But first, I have a question from Twitter for you guys, is from Agenda Defender. How do you each define tempo, and how does one best gain it and come back when they're behind? So Jonas, do you maybe want to answer the question first, as you're known as the aggro tempo guy?
Okay. I mean, tempo is one of the most fake concepts in card games. I think most people kind of struggle to explain it, and I'm no different in this context. But I have to try to formulate a very concise explanation for what tempo is. So for me, tempo is the imaginary timer in which the game ends, basically. So no matter what, the game's going to end at one particular point. Due to some person running out of resources, the game going relatively fast, and tempo just trying to dictate how long it takes to get to that end timer. There are decisions that you can make in any given moment in the game to either accelerate it by, in the context game of One Piece, just trying to keep pushing life, or in the context of making it even slower by really focusing on board and trying to use your resources to eliminate your opponent's aggression. And the easiest way in the game of One Piece to slow a game down, for purposes of tempo, is always just focusing on board, even at the cost of you developing your own characters or trying to do things from your perspective. So, like, removing your opponent's stuff, even putting all of your dawn on your opponent's character or your own characters to attack your opponent's characters, is like the easiest way to slow down the game and try to gain yourself a little bit of initiative back when you're the person that didn't start the game going first. How about you, Kai? What are your thoughts on it?
Now, this is why you do coaching and I don't. I think you explained it much better than I could. I think that the idea of tempo mostly comes from the concept of having control over the game, or more or less being able to do what you want to do and forcing the opponent to respond to that. So if you can keep playing your ideal curve and the opponent has to deal with that, then you're in control, you're in the driver's seat, so therefore you have tempo at that current state. And I think that the best way to flip that, if you're in a matchup where that just simply can't be flipped, then you need to hope for the opponent to just miss out on a card, for example. But for some matchups, the opponent's going to have the tempo early game, but if you're a late game deck, you just need to focus on stalling the game to the point where you can eventually slow down their tempo and then eventually win back the game. So I think getting tempo back very much depends on the deck that you're playing and how it interacts with the opponent's deck. But baseline, I think it's just about control over the game.
What about you, Hrvoje? I know you've played many card games. What is this idea for tempo for you? Now that you kind of can summarize it.
It's one of my least favorite words in TCGs. It's like alongside like mid-range and value, and I don't know. It's one of those things where you ask 10 different players, they will give you 10 different answers. So the way I see it is more similar to what Kai suggested, where it's like you being the one in control, in a sense that the move you make is affecting your opponent's decisions. Like, it's not just that your turn doesn't matter, it directly influences what options your opponent has. And I think like it's very difficult to put into words in context of One Piece. But for example, if you in the old formats play like Forkos Kuzan on your second turn as a black deck, that reduces the number of like characters your opponent is allowed to play in response. Like Wuchi would not be able to play their own Forkos Kuzan, they have to go into like Borsalino or something else that cannot be KO'd to actually maintain some board control of their own. But I actually think that was most common against like Black Moria, when you'd play Kuzan and they would just like go Great Eruption, Absalom, and now you're just starting to lose out on board. And yeah, I think just tempo means, like having tempo means that you're the one who is in position that like influences the other player. And it can flip off of like misplays, off of like sequences, but the problem is most of the sequences in card games with mana are well predictable. Like you know which deck is going to play which character or which card on which turn. So sometimes like it's predetermined that you want to turn off these options in advance. So like if you play Demo against Ace, you would always try to aim for like Saturn, Mars, Jupiter going second, so that you can just like basically put too much pressure on them to allow them to freely develop all the characters they want to. And now that Seven Kozora exists, they can actually turn that entire thing back on you, because a new card exists now. They can slot into the curve that allows them to alleviate the pressure. And I think it's just like a very complicated concept that has no real answer. Like, as I said, everybody's going to give an answer of their own. I even saw like in context of One Piece, somebody suggested tempo was like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like counting number of characters on board plus number of cards in hand plus life. I don't remember the full thing, but it like assigned value to each of those like variables and then use that to calculate like who has tempo. And I'm not sure that that type of thing is like something you can guarantee to be correct. But yeah, I think my opinion is more in line with what Kai suggested, like just being the one who doesn't have to react but forces the other guy to react.
Okay. I don't want to keep harping on tempo because I know it's a hard thing to talk about. We have a follow-up question. Is there a difference in your mind between being ahead in a game and having tempo in a game?
This is another difficult question.
And while we're at it, what's the difference between tempo and mid-range?
Okay, let's not go into the M word. Like I've had this debate in too many other TCGs already. I think there is like tempo you naturally gain in some matchups just because some decks are stronger early, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're ahead. Like you need to be sufficiently ahead within the context of the matchup for the tempo and being ahead to be kind of the same thing. Because like some decks, if you go into late game, you're just not going to win. Like basically the old school red decks would, something like Rayleigh would struggle a lot against like blue, yellow, Nami. Even like they're going to have tempo early, swarm the board with like these small characters, but once all those healers come in, or yellow NL is like, I guess, the classical Grim Reaper for those red aggro decks. So yeah, I don't think they're the same, but they are somewhat closely related in how they can be understood within like different matchups.
If you're ahead, you have tempo, but if you have tempo, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're ahead. So if you look at something like those red aggro decks, if you're fighting a deck like Black Lucci or something, then you can get the early advantage and have like lots of small characters on the board. But the second that the opponent goes Moria, Rebecca, Spandam, Hino Lucci or something, I don't know if that was, no, I don't think that's a combo. It's been a while. And then flips the board, then like red had tempo advantage up until that point, but they're never necessarily ahead because they need to do something to prevent that combo from actually like flipping the game. And so Lucci, while he was behind in tempo, he wasn't behind in the game because he was just trying to get to that point.
Exactly. Like you basically had to put Lucci at 0 or 1 life, where playing the Moria is what kills them. But unless you do that, the tempo kind of ends up being flipped by all these hyper efficient plays.
Let's end it there before we spend the entire thing on tempo today.
Okay, and we've time skipped a little bit, and from the last time skip, the set has come out, and it's already been a couple of weeks. Sorry about that. And in that time, we've had a couple of regionals. I believe, Jonas, you were at which event again?
I was in the Peoria regional last weekend, and I was fortunate enough to get top 8 with Black Yellow Teach.
Yeah, congratulations. You're also on stream as well. And speaking of people on the stream, of course, Hrvoje was also on stream in a different region. How did you do?
I played Mexico, so Latam, and I got top 4 in the regional with Bulgarian Luffy. So it's like the other big contender of OP16. And yeah, I was on stream, I think, once in Swiss and twice in Top Cut. Once to my dismay, because it did not go that well.
Yeah, I did see the replay of that game because I was thinking, how does Green Blue Luffy beat Purple NL? And I didn't learn exactly from that game. So, but still,
you have to open better than that.
yeah, it should usually go better than that. But yeah, so we have a Green Blue Luffy and a Black Yellow Teach. I've also been playing lots of Black Yellow Teach. That hasn't changed for me either in OP17. But I think so. This is a good way to kind of get into this discussion about the meta that has been unfolding, to kind of give a sort of context, because Japan's still not quite at global release yet, but we're getting there. Has had the meta for a couple weeks longer than the West. And the beginning of the meta was lots of Black Yamato, very hyped deck in Japan as this sort of teach killer deck that's really supposedly good into the old meta. And that deck started to die down a little bit in terms of play rate as other decks have risen up, like Black Yellow Teach, like Green Blue Luffy. And now we're kind of in this meta where it's a bit tricky to say what the actual best deck in the format is, but I guess I'll ask a open question. Either one of you guys can jump in on this if you have an opinion. Do you think that the deck that you brought to that tournament that day, whether it's Black Yellow Teach or Green Blue Luffy, is the best deck in the format right now?
I think we might both say yes.
I'm not sure if I would say yes. I don't think there's a best deck when it's a complete jungle, but I did take the deck I have the best chances with. So
I guess for my preparation for this upcoming weekend, obviously I had a lot of data from Japan and Southeast Asia in terms of teach configurations. I got a decent amount of inspiration from a Thai player. I think his name is Vespa, in terms of how well he was doing with BY Teach. I think he was playing a lot of 9-cost boas. He was the first person I saw to play 4 Burgess and 4 San Juans, and that kind of gave me a little bit of ideas to kind of mess around with the list, and that's kind of where a lot of my ideas for the deck list kind of came from. I think at level 0 in the very beginning of the format, trying to beat the 2 most popular decks in the previous format, namely Nami and Enel, is just a comfortable place to be. And I do think that Teach boasts 2 good matchups there. I do think it has a lot of new bad matchups in the upcoming meta. Mainly, I think Blue-Green is unfavored. I think Yamato is also pretty hard as well. So those are still difficult matchups, but from the first couple weeks in Japan, it seemed like those decks didn't seem as popular, even though they seemed like they were doing okay for the most part. So I was just fine, hoping to kind of rely on a lot of people's inexperience playing into a weird deck like Teach. And I was fortunate enough to kind of rely on that in a relatively wide Swiss, even though I did play against 3 Namis in Swiss, which is pretty nice.
On my end, it's more I think it's a universal experience in TCGs that when a format is new, the type of deck that does the best is aggro, just because aggro decks are generally very streamlined in the sense that you kind of do your own thing regardless of the matchup, and that's, I assume, also why Yamato was so popular early on in the East. And for this regional specifically, I mean, in testing, it turned out that there was pretty much no unplayable matchup for Blue-Green Luffy. There's a few rough ones, especially among more rogue picks such as Red Ace, Calgara, and so on. You can tech for them, like the Adams list that was first in Swiss with Gravity Blaze is much better against those types of decks than mine is. I was over respecting Rosinante with the Electrical Lunas because I figure he's going to be a lot more popular, and then Luna just has a lot more utility against other decks. And yeah, the deck it didn't feel like it had any real glaring holes or weaknesses. Naturally, among the strongest decks, NL was its worst matchup, and I did expect NL to be less popular than it was in LATAM, because it's a very beatable matchup. You need to see some 2-costs to have the fuel early, and then you need to see the buggy combo. I think buggy combo is the defining feature of the deck, and the reason it gets to do so well in so many matchups, because fielding 2 6k bodies early on is just too much pressure for most decks to keep up with, especially when in later turns you follow it up with strong control tools like Boa, like Galdino, or just Electrical Luna to freeze up the board. So yeah, it just felt like a really good proactive choice for a point in time where not a lot of people are going to be familiar with like play patterns of all the different decks, perhaps even their own. So yeah, like I'm probably still gonna take it to Toulouse. I have some other considerations, like Calgary namely. But my main fear when testing Teach was like Bulgarian matchup felt completely unplayable, and there were like some other matchups which were like an uphill battle, because I think this is showcased in our global games match. If you haven't watched it, I'm sorry for the spoilers, but by the time Kai publishes this, it should have been out for like a week already. But we pretty much assume that Vespa is going to bring Black Yellow Teach, so we just targeted. Our lineup was just like 4 decks that destroy Teach, and we just win because it's Conquest format. You need to win with every deck. And I was afraid that, yeah, Teach is like kind of too easy to target. And that might become more or less irrelevant as the meta goes on. I would expect more relevant, but it also depends on how popular blue-green Luffy is in each region. But yeah, just like taking aggro early in the format is a good thinking process, regardless of the format or of the TCG you're playing in.
Yeah, no, I think both of those points are very valid, whether it's you target the old meta because people haven't really bought all the cards they need for the new meta or aren't really sure what's going to end up being good, so they default back to what they're comfortable with, or just playing an aggro deck, forcing the opponent to deal with you rather than you answering anything else. So I think both of those are perfectly valid, and of course you guys did very, very well in your tournaments. Fuck, I had a question, but I completely forgot. But another question I did have, because as I'm also a Black Yellow Teach player, was you were talking about the Vespa. I believe he's from Thailand, was it? Black Yellow Teach list.
Yeah.
That includes Burgess and Borsellino and some other tech cards like the 9-cost Hancock. You lean more towards this. It does seem to be the default build right now. I still don't run either, though I probably should be running Borsellino. But one question that I have, a glaring question that I have for you as someone who doesn't run Burgess, is what matchup do you actually use that card in?
Yeah, so for me, the main matchups where Burgess, in my opinion, ends up mattering are the aggressive matchups where I either need to build a board fast or I need to like have enough swings to actually pressure against them. So the main ones I think that matter the most are like Anel, PY Rosie, and actually Blue-Green Luffy. I think against PY Rosie and Blue-Green Luffy, a really common play pattern is if you start playing bodies that matter on like your 6th turn, you can easily get tempoed out by them just answering your one big body. Whether it's Blue-Green Luffy just being like Boa your guy into Galdino your next guy into that kind of like tempo nonsense, or for PY Rosie just getting Sakamama to Oblivion. I think you need to have at least some sort of pressure to like actually stick a board. Otherwise, you're kind of just doomed to fail from the start. Obviously, if they don't have like Sakamama, or if the blue-green doesn't have like multiple Galdinos or Boas, you kind of have some sort of pressure back. But I do think that having that 4-cost body does make a lot of those matchups a little bit better. Obviously, against Teach, like going second, having that body on 4 does make the game go by a lot, make your second draw a lot better, but making your second draw better isn't that much better or that much more important. But it does give you a little bit more game going first as well. But I do think it's just the matchups where they can just kind of ignore you playing 6-8 into 8-10 is where you need that extra body to kind of have that little bit of extra pressure.
I mean, in my Teach testing, it was the same, like, because usually the way you would punish the disrespectful green-blue players was like if they take too many lives and then you suddenly Zehaha and you manage to lock them up for a turn and then kill them next turn because they took like 2 lives carelessly. Like you can usually afford to take 1 for free, but then you have to be really careful about going down to 2 for no reason.
But yeah, those are like the main matchups. But have those matchups been? I mean, those are the matchups I kind of struggled with the most in initial testing. That's kind of why I gravitated towards Burgess. But I wanted to hear kind of your thoughts on that logic and how your games against those decks had felt.
I think actually this might be an interesting thing about a difference between the East and the West, and that's that if you look at the play rate of decks in the East in the last Miyagi Championship, Purple Yellow Roshinante's play rate was 3%, very, very low play rate deck, whereas Black Yamato was still 10%. It was one of the most represented decks. Like basically the top 5 decks were all around 10%-ish. There's like, I believe it was either Teach or NL, oh no, I think it was Nami was the highest at like 13%, but like they're all in that 10% range. And also another big thing is that Japanese, in my opinion at the very least, Japanese NL players are not as good as Western NL players. So, okay, sorry, I thought my Wi-Fi cut out for a second.
Yeah, the government heard you and they were like, oh, no, you're not slandering Japan.
But at least from my testing, when I fight against Western NL players, it feels a lot more closer. But when I fight against Japanese NL players, I feel like there's no chance for the opponent to come back into the game, just because they have this very predictable play pattern that I can account for and be prepared for with things like Vasco shot, whereas Western NL players, I think especially because of the miracle version that people are more used to playing and playing against in the West, does pose a bit more threat for Teach if they can manage to actually take out your board. And in those sorts of matchups, I do agree that having the extra attacker in that forecast Burgess would be good. But I think especially because I'm in the East where these matchups are less scary for me personally, I've decided not to run the forecast Burgess, instead prioritizing cards that are specifically teching for either things like the mirror going first or green blue Luffy, in which I run things like Wiper, but one Wiper alone isn't really enough, so still looking for ways to make the green blue Luffy matchup a little bit better.
It's a hard uphill battle for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the point that Hrvoje brought up is super relevant in that Teach, extremely powerful deck. It does feel like yellow NL in a lot of ways, but does have a lot of glaring weaknesses. I think that one big one that a lot of people are going to point out as one of the defining reasons to not play Teach is that the mirror feels very brutal. Going first in the mirror does really suck a lot of the times. A lot of times it's just if the opponent draws what they want to draw, they just win. So that's one unfortunate thing about Teach. And then you have things like Green Blue Luffy, who's becoming more and more popular. That's also a bad matchup as well. But aside from those two things, I think that the deck is very well situated.
It was a long time since we last talked about OP16. I think the last time we talked about it was when the set wasn't even fully spoiled. At least on the last episode. I think back then we were saying that like the blue-green Luffy leader looked pretty bad. Hrvoje, in the past, ever since then, we got a lot of broken spoilers. What made you change your mind about this deck? And then what tools have captivated you regarding the blue-green Luffy deck?
Okay, I'll be honest, I don't remember what was... It's been like 2 months since then.
Yeah, I think we basically only had Bon Clay and Ivankov.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I do remember what you said, though. And you said, I don't know what other cards we're going to get, but the only thing I can say for sure is that Green Blue Luffy is not going to be good. Something on those lines.
Yeah, he's gonna just dig up the receipt because he has the power of editing on his side. So I will say I expect nothing, and I mean nothing from Ace and from Luffy. Like those two, I would already sign off. So I'm just gonna look extra bad when he like does the slow like reverb. I expect nothing, and I mean nothing from Luffy. I'm cooked, but I think the biggest thing is buggy. That's like because if maybe. I'm not sure if this is extreme opinion, but I think if there was no buggy, Zonji would just be a better green blue Luffy in every way, because that's the card that really makes the difference and gives you the board presence and the ability to push through removal, through unlucky triggers, through freezes. It's like just getting two bodies, one of which like is a blocker and the other replaced itself. Is so much tempo, like turn 3 already, that most decks cannot really match it. Obviously, there's a lot of nice supporting pieces in. Or maybe even had Crocodile when we did the first review, now that I think about it. But yeah, combination of Dust Bones, Bonclay, like the self-replacing cards, those are all like very nice, but Buggy is the main driver of the deck. Boa and Galdino are nice because I think what makes aggro deck strong, and it's why I like OP3 Zoro, is when you can start aggro, but then at any point in like mid or late game, you can just pivot to a more controlled playstyle where you just take a slower turn, which completely locks your opponent's options. Like makes their turn very predictable, very weak. That's what like really makes good aggro decks. And Boa and Galdino make that possible for Green Blue Luffy, but they are not what would sell me on the deck. Because as I said, if there was no buggy, I think Zonji just has access to way more good cards than Luffy would have alone. Because in Zonji you can still run the 2 costs and the Crocodile.
No, I'm very sad that Zanji ended up not being very good.
I wouldn't say. I just think it's weaker Luffy.
Yeah.
They should make Buggy no longer impel down locked, but
when 6-cost Miho comes out in starters, you'll see.
That's Chilean hats, right? That's the first event with the 5 starter decks, so you can mess around with it.
Okay, I might be cooking. The Teach was like hyped right out of the gate, I believe. So I don't think you were expecting to play it as early as it was revealed, but maybe that was the case. Like there were the really big spoilers that we got afterwards, which was the haha and the 8-cost each. So I'm sure those nudged you more towards playing the deck. But how has your opinion of the deck changed from just the spoilers to piloting it now to a top 8?
Yeah, so I made a tweet about it a while ago, kind of making an analogy that's pretty similar to a combination of OP09 Teach and NL and OP05 NL. And I do agree with that statement, but the one caveat with that statement is I don't think those decks are particularly great week 1 of a format. Those decks are usually like shine like in the middle of a format once you kind of know exactly what you're targeting and you kind of give up equity against kind of more rogue matchups. Like even when OP9, OP10 Blackbeard was really popular, then if a random stray limb got into your bracket, you kind of had to struggle a little bit. So even still, like these kind of decks that really rely on understanding what meta exists in the format and really preying upon the particular popular decks is very strong, but having some bad matchups can definitely like dampen your mood or dampen your run for sure. So week 1, I think it's like kind of a little bit risky to play a deck like this. Even though a lot of people did relatively well in Toronto, I think there were 6 teachers in Top Cut. I do think that if people really want to target this deck, I think that you can, but at the sacrifice of a lot of equity. Whether you play a deck like blue-green and then give yourself a little bit worse time against yellow or purple NL, or you play something like Yamato. And I don't want to say too many bad words about Yamato, but I'm not a huge fan of this matchup spread.
Oh, no, go ahead.
It's fine. I was just gonna say that I don't know
If
what
leader is 6,000 or more,
we don't talk about 6K leaders. Yamato only gets paired against 5K leaders, and everyone's happy. But yeah, that's like the main thing with Teach. I do think it's really powerful against the popular decks in the format. But if you get paired against Yamato, blue green in the first 3 rounds, hopefully there's another tournament to play in that weekend.
okay, in the West that is the case usually.
I had a tournament last week where I didn't post anything on Twitter, so I did really well in it. Where round 1 I hit Black Yamato, and how did I lose again? I lost to them playing 2 Momonosuke's on Tendong and just doing double combo on me the next turn, where it's like
oh, you didn't have the Shiryu Sanhwan to survive?
No, I didn't have Shiryu Sanhwan ready, so it was just like play out the.
So they were doing backflips on your dead body. Like,
God, it was so brutal. And then like also the 8-cost Yamato that plays out a 2-cost can also play out Shinobu, so it triggers the second Momonosuke combo as well. So I just got hit by like 8 5K and 6K attacks on the same turn. I'm like, fuck, dude, I know you're gonna lose in round 2, but it was unfortunate. And then round 2, I fought against a green blue Luffy. So like that sort of thing can definitely happen. If I was good at every single deck in the game, then I would not have brought Teach to that tournament, because I think that right now, because I think one of the factors is that a lot of people were very hyped for Teach from the instant that it was revealed. Like the leader effect looked good, all of the cards looked really good, so people were expecting Teach to be good, that people are over hating Teach in a way where they're playing decks that are specifically good into Teach, and therefore neglecting matchups that are, for example, good into NL in the case of Japan, which is why we saw NL win twice in a row in Japan, or especially right now, neglecting decks that are good into Green Blue Luffy, which is why we saw Red Ace do quite well in the West, in the Treasure Cup, as well as the main event most recently. So I think that now that we've had a couple of tournaments across the world, we've set this precedent for decks that maybe in a very roundabout way are a triangle, where you have like Green Blue Luffy, maybe Purple NL / Blue Yellow Nami, and Teach. And then it's just kind of what do you play within that triangle. Now people aren't going to be targeting Teach as much, so Teach may end up being better, but then how does that change Luffy's equity in the meta? Lots of questions that you actually need to ask. But so we've talked a lot about Green Blue Luffy and Black Yellow Teach. I am curious what you guys think about how the old decks in OP15 in Blue Yellow Nami and Purple NL have seemed to fare in this new meta. Are they still, in your opinion, top contenders, or have they lost a bit of equity, you think, maybe Yonas?
So me personally, I have lost a lot of faith in NL, mostly because I don't really know how to beat Teach with NL. As long as the Teach kind of really knows how to manage the resources well, I just don't know how to win without drawing like exactly 4 varies and catching them stumbling, basically. which is obviously a plan, of course. But those matchups, like that matchups felt quite hard. And I mean, I think NL has a lot of better matchup spreads. I do think that like a lot of the other decks that did well, like Lucy won Toronto, or not Peoria Regional rather, and like NL's still good into that matchup. NL's still good against Blue Green Luffy, of course, and that's a really important like boon for NL. But I really don't like playing the Teach matchup, and the Nami matchup hasn't gotten any better. And speaking of Nami, I think like the silent upgrade of Forecast Galdino is probably something that shouldn't be understated. Galdino helping that deck just become kind of this like or prolong the game machine that it used to be, but even more absurdly now. Is like relatively underexplored, and it obviously did extremely well in Toronto or Peoria as well. I think it got like 10 plus people in Top Cut. So I do think that Forecast Galdino is a really powerful tool for that deck, and I'm really excited to mess around with Nami more. But at the same time, I don't really like Nami's playstyle too much, so I'm not a huge fan of trying to bring it to regionals. So I do think that Nami is probably the biggest winner of the two behemoths of last format, but Anel is still like a pretty good like meta targeting card or deck, but it's not going to be like the tier 0 deck it used to be.
So I'll just get Nami out of the way first. I hate that deck, so I'm not playing it. I took it to one tournament, and then I faced round 1 Ace, round 2 Lucy, and they had the curve, and they just destroyed me, and I was like, okay, that's where my Nami adventure ends. It's a good deck if your opponent's on decks which counter your brick, but I don't know, I hate... Like, I lost top 16 Toronto 2-1 to Nami that just had, like, the curve, the counters, and the triggers in life too. So I'm still pissed about that. But honestly, I think Enel against Nami, despite Galdino, actually got slightly better in OP16, which is weird to say. But first of all, like, what a lot of Nami players did in deck building was, like, they increased the brick count. Like, I don't know how they managed it, but they, like, by introducing teachers, cutting rallies, and, like, still trying to keep some Marcos in, the brick count actually, like, stayed the same or went up. And you don't really feel the Galdinos until Nami takes slow turns. And the consequence of Nami taking slower turns is you get more time to potentially outgrind them, which is, like, not impossible with NL. You just have to have, like, more defensive openers with, like, more Reijus, or just play, like, the blocker NL. Or in ideal case, if you run some copies of 6-cost Rosinante, you can do, like, a more controlled playstyle against Nami. So in a sense, you can play a lot of games where presence of Galdino is not a factor, because they cannot play it in the stages which actually matter for you getting ahead in the game. Of course, they can still get a bunch of triggers. Teach can now completely, like, delete pretty much anything you play besides the 6-cost NL or Rosinante Law. But I actually think NL Nami matchup didn't get that much worse. Teach matchup, though, is a bit of a puzzle. I think if the Teach player is good and they know how to manage their resources and they don't misplay, you pretty much have no way out. But all the Teach players misplay, so you can still win those games. Like, outplay them, quote unquote, but it's mainly just them misplaying or mismanaging resources the way a less skilled player would do in the NL mirror. But that is the scariest matchup to me, and, like, my biggest fear of playing NL would be, for example, if I played NL in Mexico, top 32, Teach, and, like, okay, maybe I just go home immediately. So, yeah, I don't think actually NL's standing has become that much worse. I'm just afraid of the Teach matchup, because I assume there's always going to be some Teachers in Top Cut, because there's so many matchups in the meta where Teach just heavily punishes and wins out. And I don't think I can beat the Teachers in Top Cut. But yeah, I actually think NL's quite a strong pick. I was just afraid to take it because I was expecting a lot of yellow in Mexico, which, to be fair, turned out correct, because I played against 7 Namis. They won with green blue Luffy, so... But overall, I might take it for one of the tournaments in OP16. NL, I mean.
I kind of want to talk about another OP16 deck that I haven't thought about too much. I guess not an OP16 leader, but got a lot of new buffs in Boa. It got 4th in the second Japanese regional. And it got 2 new blockers. Like, I forget, one's Sandersoni, I forget the other sister's name. But it's just a 4-cost 5k blocker and then 5-cost 5k blocker. I'm not... Yeah, I don't want to guess her name either. Aside from its, like, Teach matchup looking like... I know that matchup's horrendous for Boa. What what bonus or pros do you guys see for playing Boa in these upcoming regionals? I'm not entirely sure what other matchup spreads it has that are quite good. I know historically the Nami matchup used to be quite bad, but I'm wondering like if Boa has a lot more legs in the upcoming format. You can start with you, Kai, if you have any like preliminary thoughts.
So I have to be honest, I haven't tested into the deck all too much, but I will say that I absolutely hate everything fundamentally about Hancock as a deck, and that hasn't changed, even though I understand that it wasn't as strong in the West. That deck with Quasar and Borsalino was ridiculous to fight against in the East. And that still, it feels kind of reminiscent of that in a way where basically the deck has shifted from I don't even know what you'd call the old version of the deck, but it's kind of just good trigger slop in a way. You get nice triggers and you close out the game with your 9-cost Hancocks and Perfume Femur. You can't really do that anymore. So the deck has shifted into a much more tanky build where basically you just run like, I don't even know how many, like 30 cards that heal life or something. And you just hope that you stack pretty good triggers because there are a lot of very, very good triggers in that deck. So the difference between Nami, despite them both healing a lot, would be that it's a little bit more fragile relatively, but the opponent has very little control over the board compared to Nami, because if you take out their characters, then you start to lose your life, and also the triggers in Boa are better. I don't actually know which one is better in that comparison, but I do think that it's an interesting parallel to draw, that they play very similarly, but Boa does seem, at the very least, if you just compare the two, a bit more interesting in just the way that it plays out the game.
I'm not a fan of Boa, mainly because I think she's poorly positioned against the two most popular yellow decks. Whereas when you consider other yellow options such as Kalgara, at least it can do well against Teach, even if it loses into Nami. Boa, it feels like it loses into Nami by pretty much default. And then against Teach, if they play well, if they starve, and they get to just spam 10 costs, you also lose into Teach. And then there's also the problem where it's a yellow deck which doesn't punish NL, pretty much. Because, especially now that NLs are running Holy again, Boa dies on like 8 Dawn. Like, there's not really much you can do about surviving the onslaught. So to me, just like all downsides and very little upsides for Boa in this format. Even though she gets like to be more like the slop deck that just gets a bunch of triggers and heals, I don't think it's good. So
I don't know who was the person that added 8-cost Warrior to the deck with no other Thriller Bark. I'm not sure if they're a genius or actually evil or both, but it's a pretty miserable interaction when people get to just go like Nami Borsalino and just gain that card on top. But I think it's a fun thing.
Yeah. Speaking of Nami, it reminds me of OP03 Nami, where they put in, I believe it was Impel Down All Stars or something, the trigger that just draws 2 cards. It feels so disgusting, but it feels even more disgusting in Boa because she doesn't have great ways to get it out of her hand, unlike Nami in OP03. But no, that's been brutal. I actually almost lost to a Nami playing Teach the other day just because they triggered 2 Morias out of life and ended up healing 2 life. And I was out of 10-cost Teach. It's like, wait, hold on. What am I supposed to do now? But we got there in the end, but it gets very, very annoying after a little while. But yeah, I think, I haven't tested against the deck enough to actually give like a good opinion on it. One thing I am noticing, though, is that the decks that do well if you don't hit Teach are winning a lot in Japan. And I think that part of that is that the Teach lists in Japan are not very good, and also Black Yamato's play rate is randomly very high. So I think that there's a lot of like the Teaches are worse and people are playing more counter decks, so therefore Teach is not doing that well. So therefore the decks that only are punished by Teach are doing really, really well in Japan right now.
how much of that is actually due to like more economic sensitivity about the prices of the deck in Japan? Because I feel like people are way more like, how can Borsalino cost this much? How can Teach cost this much in Japan than they would be in the West? Because I know they're used to like everything being cheap. So is that playing a factor as well?
I think it could be. I think especially just the yellow in general is just extremely expensive right now. And that being said, though, there were a lot of Namis, and Nami does run Borsalino. But I think it's just if you don't already own Borsalinos and you have to buy Borsalinos and 8-cost Teach to play this deck that presumably loses to a couple of pretty big meta contenders, I feel like people just decide not to even bother with the deck, and so therefore you have this disparity in terms of play rate versus its actual power. But so I do think it probably does actually have a reasonably significant impact. How much? It's hard to say though.
I know this is not a market watch channel, but how much is Japanese 8 cost? Is it comparable to the Bourse?
Borsalino, they're about the same price. So 8 cost each has come down a little bit. It's about 6,000 to 7,000 yen, which is about like $40 to $50 US. And then Borsalino is 8,000 yen, which is about 55-ish dollars. So
But it's actually more expensive than most Western decks at this point.
yep. Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
think that
nice.
this is the first time that the Eastern version of the deck is more expensive than the Western version of the deck. So that, with the fact that you don't make as much money in Japan, it's like if you want to play Teach, you have to work a week. So I think it is actually playing like a pretty good big factor, especially because we don't actually have that many events either. So it's a pretty big investment just for like the fun of the game, you know?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that is one big thing that people need to consider. I bought Teach regardless of that just because I enjoy the deck, and I've been playing it, trying my best against the green-blue Luffys, but I've had pretty reasonable success into Black Yamato, despite the matchup feeling a little bit scary, just thanks to things like the San Juan Wolf.
Randomly, I kind of want to tell everyone because it was funny. When we were talking about San Juan Wolf, I didn't want to write the entire name down, so I initialized it to SJW, and everyone just thought it meant Social Justice Warrior. So I've been calling San Juan Wolf my White Knight from now on because he protect.
That's pretty good.
I would say another OP16 deck, which I didn't expect to like do well. We might have trash talked it as well in the original video. I hope we didn't go too hard. Was Red Ace? I expect nothing, and I mean nothing from Ace. But turns out that deck, it has some legs. Like, well, I guess maybe I'm biased from Bulgarian and Luffy standpoint, but 6 cost AK dudes as well as Izo, which you can play on 3 and attach one to the Izo. That deck is not as bad as I thought it would be. Like, I'm almost tempted to play it because Vista sweeps, and Marco is like one of the best protection effects maybe in the game's history because it's on such a large body and it's a generic like reusable protection effect that, yeah, I mean, deck could be a lot stronger than anticipated, and I think we might actually see it a lot more than after the success it had in Peoria.
I think there was in Peoria, the one person got third place in the Treasure Cup. I think it was Long, a guy who's known for making deck lists or like deck brews in random formats, including this one. And I think another person top 32. I think his name was Opa. Was playing that deck. I think he lost to a relatively rough matchup like Lucy in top 32 though, but. Still a great showing from him.
I think that was on stream. I was watching that game. It was right before your stream match. But yeah. I don't know. The deck, like, my issue with the deck wasn't that the deck innately was bad, although I do remember that Hrvoje was saying that, like, the leader effect innately is bad. My issue with the deck mainly was that it just doesn't have enough good 8,000 power characters that you're forced to run more bad characters, I guess, to like make sure that you can actually fulfill the conditions of things like 8 cost Newgate or the 4 cost Luffy, for example. But if you can manage to like find that balance, I think the deck is decent. I think one big, like, huge merit of the deck is that it does well into Green Blue Luffy, which frankly a lot of decks don't right now. So just being able to wipe out the opponent's board while also having these large rush characters that can like hit way above into things like Buggy to like control the board, or in some cases race the opponent if they give you the opportunity, I think is just very, very good for that deck. And also, I guess, though we have zero spoilers aside from the leaders so far, OP17, we do know that we're going to be getting red Whitebeard Pirates again. And a lot of those cards can be good buffs for Ace as well. So I think that that's one of those decks to like look out for, especially in the future.
One thing that we didn't have before that we knew about now in OP16 was the Moby Dick stage. And I think that card single-handedly makes like 6 cost Jozu a significantly better card than what we initially thought during our set review or preliminary set review. Like being able to swing with Jozu on 6 instead of 7 is just like very, very different against decks like Anel and Blue-Green Luffy. So don't hurt yourself too much for saying the deck's not good.
No, that's perfectly fair. I think the stages recently are really crazy. Like we got Moby Dick, we have Marineford for Sengoku, and we also have in the upcoming start deck for Red Nika, the 1000 Sunny, which is a search plus attaching a Dong to a Luffy. Like the stages recently are getting really, really good. So excited to see. We had event creep when they printed things like Gum Gum Giant, and then we'll probably start to see stage creep.
I mean, we've had some pretty absurd stages in the past, but they were just like black stages that reduce costs. Shout out Innis Lobby. But I'm glad we're kind of experimenting more with stages, because it's always felt like something that's been kind of underexplored in the One Piece card game, and more interesting ways to mess around with it's always fun.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they were like the ships of the crew, or in some cases locations, but it always made more sense for them to be more prominently featured. And I'm really happy when they do stage alt arts as well. So the fact that Moby Dick got one in the main set is already a huge boon. Like the more stage and like stage alts and event alts are to me some of the prettiest cards in the game very consistently, just because of the amount of space and the different border they have on the cards. And from a gameplay perspective, having stages be more prominent is just a good idea. Like it's like the flagship of the crew. Maybe they shouldn't be as powerful as I think I'm not sure if it's Mary or Sunny in the starter deck. I think that one might be pushing it a little bit because of how useful the effect is. But just more better stages is good. Like there's a lot of downside of them not having a counter, but from gameplay perspective, they should be like present in the decks rather than. I think in the past it was like pretty much like Kaido's Onigashima and. Was there anything else where you ran a stage in the deck?
I think the next stage that was playable was like Moby Dick and then like Birdcage in 04.
Oh yeah, and Ice Lobby. Okay, yeah, just the really strong ones. Yeah, there was Upper Yard as well.
Yeah, Upper Yard doesn't really count.
Yeah.
It is nice for getting some more of those types of stages. I am afraid of what's going to end up coming out, because if they made like NES Lobby nowadays, it'd be like on play draw a card and then also still have the -2 cost or something like that. But or even like a search, But we'll see what ends up coming out. I don't really like stages in the game in general, just because the difference in power between if you find or don't find the stage on curve is very large in a lot of cases. Like especially if you look at things like Teach, for example, if you find Hachinose or Full Lead on turn 1 versus on like turn 3 when you're on curve trying to play Shiryu, like you can just be kind of screwed in a lot of cases. So there's a lot of randomness that's introduced if you're playing a deck that needs to run a stage, for example. If you like hard mulligan for it, then you find it like about 66% of the time. And so I don't really love that, which is why I liked Imu, that you just always have the stage on the board from the beginning of the game. But it's one thing that does worry me a little bit, that as they make stages stronger, that also means that disparity between not having and having the stage is also going to be a lot larger as well.
That's true.
Yeah, that's why I think the power level of stages shouldn't be too high, because a lot of these older decks, they had like stages fulfilled their consistency roles, but in a way that was like too reliant on the stage. Like pretty much all of the location stages that are like discard, look at top 3, it was like Rev Army HQ, Germa Kingdom, Full Lead, like they're all too central to the deck just because they are that reusable search. But if they're just like one-off search, I think it's a lot easier to include them and not like immediately miss them, because like Rosinante can see stage turn 5 very comfortably and still get some use out of the filtering, because it's like not the type of effect you want to use early in Rosinante anyways.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Like repeatable stages feel like they make a huge difference. So like that new Sunny does feel like it's going to be it's not as relevant as missing out on like Onigashima or Full Lead, for example. But like if you're playing Red Green Luffy or something, having and not having that Don card can be very important depending on your curve. So we'll see what they end up doing with that. And I guess one way that they can battle that is just by printing even more searches to make sure that you find the stage, but that introduces other problems as well. Yeah, well, still though, we've talked about a couple of the OP16 decks. There are still a couple that I don't know if we want to talk about every single one of them, but one that I do want to talk about that I also think that we maybe underrated a little bit, which I believe ended up winning a regional in China, though I didn't watch that regional, so I don't actually know, is Sengoku.
I unfortunately have not tested this deck, but I want to play this so badly, but I don't want to spend the time to procure the cards. So to get people TLDRs in the finals of the Chinese regional, because I don't think it was like it was Enel versus Sengoku, And the game was like pretty like bad for the Enel player, to be completely candid. Like they missed Enel on curve, and once Sengoku put 3 bodies in play, their turn was just Gamma Knife Mamoragan, or sorry, Gamma Knife Divine Departure, kill 2 of them, and then Sengoku just put in 3 more. So that game is just like a nightmare, 100%. So I do think that the matchup's still going to be pretty hard for the most part, but I do think that Sengoku does have more legs than people have let on. And I do think it's also insanely good against Teach. Just putting 3 AK bodies that I can't remove for Vasco shot is just like a nightmare. So I do think that Sengoku has a lot more legs than people let on. I didn't think I had the time to master that deck in a couple days to prepare for an upcoming regional, but I do think there might be a lot more power in that deck than people think. Anyways, you can go on, Hrvoje, if you've played more games with that deck.
I haven't played too much, but I've played some, and I think the biggest feels bad to me is like the turn you drop 3 admirals, you're feeling so mighty and powerful, because oftentimes it's a 4 body swing on the board because you can Sakazuki Mamaraga and something the way Rosinante would. But the turn afterwards, when you're like looking at like the low hand count that you have, and just generally no real ways to create card advantage, you're like, okay, this game has to end fast or I am cooked. And then the problem is, what about playing against decks that pressure you so hard that you're already like kind of struggling on hand size even before you drop the admirals, and that's like where the real weaknesses of the deck show, namely again against Green Blue Luffy, but also against Enel, against Yamato. Like all these decks that can pressure you super fast, there are like late game tools you can run to mitigate those like low to the ground aggro decks somewhat. But you really feel the lack of card advantage generation the deck has, just because you have to play three guys out of your hand, and not one of them replaces themselves. Like at best, you are doing the extra body swing on the board by using Mamaragan. Maybe there's some like deck building creativity that hasn't been like fully explored yet. I saw some people even play like Lightning Dragons, but yeah, I would probably be too scared to take it to one of the tournaments at the moment, just because I think you need experience with the deck, like to handle all the different matchups. Like if you watch our global games against Thailand, in our Sengoku against each match, like one key thing you need to know is you need the second Kuzan in the matchup. If you don't know that, you can just like throw away the game because you like they freeze your first Kuzan, suddenly they're getting all the free blocks they shouldn't have to, and that can like completely cost you a game. And those types of like tips, like pieces of knowledge you need to have in different matchups are like there's a lot of them. So yeah, it's a deck that rewards experience, but once again, it has that it really feels bad moment of once you do the play and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm kind of out of cards and I need to be more careful. That I don't particularly like in a competitive deck.
Yeah, I haven't played the deck like basically at all. I had a single game where I fought it IRL, and it was a game that I fought against the last year's Japan champion, Yadang, the person who won with Red Green Smoker. It was closer than it should have been. I almost said lethal. He had enough counter in the end when I tried to go for lethal. But yeah, no, that deck, I think it's just a fairly well-situated deck. It does have the benefit of being good into Teach. But I do think that I just don't see in my head, and this might just be my lack of testing and ignorance, I don't see how it's supposed to beat aggressive decks like Green Blue Luffy, or maybe even Black Yamato, for example, that can abuse the fact that your hand size is going down fairly low when you're playing down those big bodies.
You know, like your saving grace against Yamato is pretty much you have to chain Sakazukis on their Yamato's turn after turn, and then if you run the Roger, you can maybe get out. But as I said, like card advantage is a premium in One Piece. Probably will be for a while, especially now that like there's. I don't think we ever talked about this much after the initial bans, but the fact that there is no pudding and now you get to play with like decent hand sizes and actually consider your plays, I love that. I love that so much.
I don't miss pudding. As someone who's played pudding probably more than most, I don't miss it at all. So
Pudding is like a whole nother debate. People are asking for the card back when they see these massive hand sizes that people are accumulating. But yeah, still though, Sengoku, you know, we just talked about Sakazuki as well. Very interesting deck within the meta. Hard to say exactly how good it is without proper testing. One of the more popular decks recently has been Purple Yellow Shinante, which we did touch upon a little bit in the beginning. And it did seem like the hype for that deck has died down a little bit. I think that, especially in the West, when they first showed the support, a lot of people were more excited for the deck. And then, I've seen people criticizing the deck, calling it OP06 Moria compared to OP05 Sakazuki, where it's just a slight downgrade compared to Purple NL. But do you think that this deck has merit to play over Purple NL from your testing, Yonas?
Yeah, I'll admit I'm a hater, and here's kind of what my testings kind of led to my reasoning. Basically, I feel like PY Rosie, either in this current configuration, either tries to mimic a fraction of Anel's power by doing a lot of like reduction plus Mamoragan, or like lightning, or Gum Lightning, stuff like that, and it does that like relatively fine, but slightly worse than Anel. Or it tries to kind of block her up and gain life, kind of similarly to how Anel or how Nami does, and just try to like play a bunch of relatively big blockers and try to like nickel and dime cards and grind the game out that way. And that it also does that slightly worse than Nami does. So I just feel like you kind of have both options, but you're not excellent at doing either. And honestly, that for that feeling in and of itself just kind of like put a relatively bad taste in my mouth. Like, for example, in a lot of games when you end up going to like 0 or 1 relatively early, and then you have to make a weird choice between playing a Sakazuki and clearing their guy, but leave yourself exposed to dying potentially, or just have to play a board and let your opponent build a board. That kind of tension with a deck that really is kind of clunky in terms of its plays has kind of made that deck relatively unexciting for me to play. So that's like my spiel about why I don't like the Rosie deck, and kind of the rationale about why I probably won't be bringing it for the rest of the format.
I might play it at some point in the format. Like, I'm even considering it for Toulouse as my third pick. The first two are obviously Luffy and Calgara, but Rosinante specifically, I mean, he does feel like weaker than L, but he has a better Nami matchup. And I think he also, in general, just does better against Teach because Sakazuki Lightning handles big bodies. Like, you have a much easier time controlling the board if you see the pieces. The problem is all the pieces are less searchable, and the deck generally took a consistency hit with how the new builds go, because, okay, to be fair, you're not as reliant on seeing a 4-cost on 3 anymore. Like, seeing multiple Rosie laws are what you want to see, and then Saka combos, but there's still a big difference in gameplay in games where you do see a 4-cost on 3, namely the promo rather than the OP16 Kidlo. But yeah, the fact that you like shifted away from consistency and you're like Kobe is pretty much the only searcher that matters because you want to find Sakazuki. It does remove some of the appeal from the deck for me. But I do think like its position in the meta is, I would say, relatively better than NL, just because of how much like what's the word for it? How much you get in the Nami and Teach matchups compared to NL. So yeah, I still find it a respectable pick. I think you even have decent game into Green Bull Luffy, but it also depends on what they tech. Like the Gravity Blade, which some run now, can be a complete blowout, especially in games where you don't see 4-cost on 3 or 4. And Luna can be an even bigger nail in the coffin for the deck. But yeah, I mean, I like the deck. I'm not sure if it was overhyped at any point. I think it was like a very, it wasn't underwhelming, it wasn't overwhelming, it was just like whelming. Like, people want to play it, and I think those who dedicated their time to it and like practice it, they should play it because it's a strong enough deck, and I'm sure it will top a fair bit.
No, that's completely fair. It might just be that my subscriptions feed is full of Krulzer, so I just see a bunch of Rosinante content. Yeah, but
Krulzor and Holden Miller holding the fort.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, even like Skip Us, for example, shout out to him in the global games right now. Big Rosinante copers. But one question that I have been wanting to ask since the beginning of this episode, but I felt like we needed to kind of build up to it, get rid of the more meta contenders, is that you keep talking about Karugara, Hrvoje. It seems like a pretty decently situated deck within the meta, but I have not actually tested it at all. Can you tell me anything about this deck?
Okay, so first of all, the Nami matchup is rough. You probably lose. That's a given. But it's really well positioned into Blue Green Luffy. It's well positioned to Teach. It has sufficient game into NL, especially going first. Like, I would even say your favorite going first, even though that might depend on the exact NL build, but a lot of people have been cutting Senor Pinks nowadays, so I think it teeters more towards Calgara's side. So they just has a lot of good matchups across the board. Some of the support pieces it has gotten over the last 5 sets, I guess. Sky Island has had a lot of support. They're really good. Notably, it has a very cool suite of 5-cost units in the Viper. The best one is obviously Draw Calgara, but there's Viper, there's the EBO3 Nami, there's the... I mean, even Nolan, but like Borsellino is the less... what's the word for it? Borsellino is just a stronger option. But point is, there's a lot of good 5-costs, and your deck's doing 6k or 7k easily. The only problem is, Nami, you kind of have to see them low roll a little bit for you to have a chance. And you hope to dodge Ace. And I guess Mihawk. And anything green that can Luna you. Like, red, green, Luffy, Mihawk, Nami, Ace. If you dodge those, I think you're in a really good position. And that's not that unrealistic because only Nami is really a popular pick in this meta. So I think Calgara is very well positioned right now. So as I said, I'm considering taking it to lose.
Yeah, if like Nami is the only like matchup that you realistically need to dodge, then it's kind of the same as like any of the other top decks that need to dodge one of the decks as well. So I see that as like a perfectly good option. I didn't know that the NL matchup was actually like that good, just because NL has things like Lightning Dragon to stun your characters. But I mean, I guess if you just fill up the board fast enough, then it doesn't actually end up mattering.
You have a lot of characters.
Yeah, no, it's just a lot of characters.
And there's also like when you freeze Viper or Calgara 5-cost, it's like not that amazing because they still get their effects while they're on the board. So you need to specifically kill them to deny that value. And Calgara is really good at printing cards when he establishes the 5-cost.
Dog is still good against them though. Beware.
Okay, so in my testing, like way back in OP15, if you put Calgara to 0 too fast, it's not even that good because they just get a free effect and they heal. Like
it's not about the double attack. It's about making sure my ohms don't die to Wiper.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
true.
I do think the double attack's not that insane against the deck, but yeah, I do think that making sure that your ohm survives so you can actually pressure their 6Ks when you make them 4Ks with the key 10 is like actually real. And
there's always the Sky and the Bell Wolfie push for game, which you have to play around as an L, and that's probably one of the most annoying things you have to play around because like I don't think any NL build nowadays runs 2K Sanji. It's all event 2Ks and Divine Departures. But yeah, I think the deck is like generally underestimated in the meta right now. I know there's a few people who are dedicated mains who I might see bringing it to European tournaments, like I don't know how to pronounce this. Weim from Berlin, the guy who won several serials with Calgara, Nightingale from UK, maybe my brother as well. He didn't win a serial yet, but we'll see. In the tournament,
I got top 16 in Peoria as well, so don't sneeze at it.
Basically, what put it on my radar was getting brutalized by it when I was playing Teach on the ranked sim. And then from there I realized like, it also beats Goofy, doesn't it? And like, so I've kind of kept my eye on the deck, but I haven't actually been able to like test it all too much. So maybe I'll steal your list later, Hrvoje. But yeah, definitely, because we're in a jungle meta, lots of sort of exciting picks to consider for the upcoming tournaments. Are there any other picks that you're maybe considering? Some slightly rogue decks, Yonas, that people haven't really been, or just like anything that you're considering?
I've been contemplating Lucy just because I know it did well, but boasting a good Nami and Teach matchup is like pretty powerful in and of itself. So that's like the number, like the thing that I'm thinking about the most, aside from like begrudgingly playing Nami. But that's about it, to be honest. Like the rogue decks haven't like seemed particularly exciting to me, unfortunately, at this point in time. So I'll have to see some other people cook with them more and see if anything catches my eye.
Maybe Kobe, but I didn't test it. Like with all the travels I did lately, because there was too many intercontinental trips, I didn't like get as many games as I wanted to on anything in the last like 2.5 weeks. But maybe Kobe, because he didn't get any new support, but he seems naturally well positioned against like Green Blue Luffy, so that already like makes me like look towards it. And as an L builds also shift more like away from pure board control, I think that matchup will also get a slightly easier. But then again, the problem is Nami. Like there's no deck that covers everything, so yeah, the rogue is not too exciting. But if I had to pick one, it's Kobe.
I don't think I have any big cope decks recently that I've been thinking about, because I've kind of been thinking about the start decks, which are coming out in I believe like 2 weeks-ish in Japan, and then a little bit later for you guys. But that'll once again shake things up. Still excited for those. Are there any other decks that you guys want to talk about?
I think I said I was most hyped for Buggy back when we did the original episode, maybe. But that deck sucks. Like, I'm not playing it. Like, just to get that out of the way, I used to be hyped for it. Not anymore. This card, though, it stays in my deck for sure. Like,
Yeah, the unfortunate, like the 2-cost Luffy that attaches a Dolin card being 2-cost kind of sucks, unfortunately. But yeah, I think Buggy definitely, I don't know how you say. He does something scary, but he does something scary versus players that don't understand what Buggy does. So it's like a lot of the times you play out like a small blocker, or you play out the Mr. 2 or something, and like suddenly it's like a 6,000 power character on the board, and like, well, that's crazy. But like if you just attack at the correct timings, or importantly don't attack at specific timings, then like Buggy's really at the opponent's mercy a lot of the time. So unfortunately, although I was pretty hyped for the deck as well, it seemed just because both Buggy and Luffy can use the 5-cost Buggy, there didn't feel like a reason to play the 5-cost or the Buggy leader.
yeah, also it's like twice as expensive because prisoners are like €5 a piece. So if you want like 18, 20 of those, you're already like past the budget for a green blue Luffy deck, which is crazy because it's a rare. Like, I don't know why it's a rare. And I don't know why we didn't get the alt art in the West. Like, now I have to like run a bunch of regular art. Like, come on, man. Like, every time I see an Eastern list, I'm jealous.
Yeah, when I saw your top 4 list in Mexico, I saw the whole line of common, or I guess for you guys, max rarity prisoners. But in Japan, those would be lowest rarity. I was thinking like how nice your deck would look if those were the alt art versions. So too bad. It'd be nice if one day like they just allow you to use treasure rares from other regions. But maybe
The Chinese
someday.
ones will go so insane.
Yeah, no, the Chinese ones are great. The Western ones miss
French
a
ones
lot
are
of the
the
time.
good ones. English gets the trash, but French treasurers are really nice.
Yeah, I'm just glad in general that Japan gets treasure rares now. So we'll see, what we get for like OP17 and stuff. But English, you guys have lots of Vista alt arts for no reason now.
Enjoy them.
At least they're usable though, because
Oh,
Red
all
Ace
this
was
stuff.
better than we thought.
But the worst part is usually, I think, Japan never cared about what the Western treasurers were, so they would like print the like when there's best selection like binders, they would give the card an alt art even if it had a treasurer elsewhere. Like the Otama is getting a best selection art, I think, but it had the French treasurer. The Green Zoro, like the one that restands, he's also in the best selection, but he got the treasure in English. But I'm afraid that they will never do a best selection with the prisoners because it was a treasure in Japan. Because if you remember, I think the first best selection had Pacifista, like the one you can run infinite copies of. In the actually maybe it was the vanilla Pacifista. I don't remember now.
I think it was the
But-
vanilla one.
Oh. No, we got it. I just thought maybe it was the unlimited Pacifista, which would make more sense because that one looked cool. A man can hope we'll get one in best selection because those sets have gotten really hard to find. Like I saw there was a drop yesterday for NA for Premium Bandai, and people were going insane because they would not be able to get anything. The site kept crashing. But yeah, fingers crossed we actually get an alt art.
An exhausting process for sure.
Yeah, it's been rough, but at least you guys have been able to win within this very turbulent time in the One Piece card game, as there's lots of hype from players and collectors alike. Still, I think if there's nothing else that you guys, no other leaders you guys want to talk about, maybe it's a good time to wrap this up. Next time we can talk about the start decks that are going to be coming out. Obviously, that's Red Nika, Green Mihawk, Blue Kazang, Purple...
Green Zoro, no.
Fuck, you got me. Red Black Sable and Yellow Kid. That'll be very exciting. I think that's going to make a big meta shakeup as well. And until then, thank you guys very much for joining me once again for the first All Blue in quite a while. And soon we'll be here a little bit more often. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, of course, check out Hrvoje and Jonas's socials in the description below. Make sure to let us know in the comments or Discord server, Twitter, any questions that you have for us. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. We'll see you guys next time very soon. Bye-bye.